Good evening. Excellent. It's my pleasure today to talk to you about the future of work. Right? I think it's on a lot of people's minds. We see these amazing discoveries happening in AI, these capabilities that are advancing, and we ask ourselves, well, what is this going to mean for me? What is it going to mean for other workers in the economy? And so I want to tell you a little bit about that. In particular, I want to talk about how good large language models are at doing tasks. I'm going to show you some data from a very, very large survey that my lab has done, evaluating how well AI works over tens of thousands of evaluations on tasks across the economy. And then ask the question, well, what is this going to mean for the expertise of workers? And why the expertise of workers in particular? Because it's going to turn out that that's a real driver of the wages that people actually get. You get paid when you have more expertise. But let me talk you through that. So let's start with the how good are these large language models? Well, as I said, we said let's start from very high level. The Bureau of Labor in the US government actually does this nice database of the different tasks that workers do. We said, fantastic. We're going to test how well LLMs can do on all of the tasks that could be done, right? Of course, move a wheelbarrow from one place to another. That's not something that's going to be included here. But the stuff that you can actually imagine a large language model doing. And here's what you find. So you can see that on the left-hand side here, there are a whole bunch of tasks, about a third of tasks, that aren't even possible. That's the wheelbarrow tasks. And then there's about another third that are not, like, the current systems are considerably worse than the average human worker doing that job. Okay. But there is this green and the blue bars where it's as good as an average worker or better than an average worker, as good as a sort of superior quality worker in that area. Now, you might look at this and say, like, whoa, I'm in a moment of panic. Those are big numbers, right? We shouldn't be panicking too much because this is giving AI a lot of advantages. When we did this test, we gave it all the information you needed. Of course, if you actually deploy AI systems in the world, it takes a whole bunch to actually integrate them and make sure that they all work together. So we should take this as a potential, not a it's immediately going to happen thing. But nevertheless, it's going to be a starting place for us to think about what's going on. And in particular, we can start to say, well, if this is what's happening at the task level, we might ask ourselves, what's going to happen at the occupation level? Okay. And in particular, we might contrast two different potential futures that we could have. So on one side, you have a world where when this automation happens, these tasks get automated, they come in sort of groups, and those groups already correspond to the occupations that we do. And so you say, oh, well, this whole job is going to disappear, but this other job is going to stay. Or the other alternative is you get a lot of partial automation, right? Some of my tasks are automated, some of your tasks are automated, but the rest of our job stays around. That's a world where there's a lot more adjustment and a lot less sort of wholesale displacement of specific people. Okay, so we can use the data that we've gathered from our survey and try and answer this question. And the result we get is emphatically partial automation. As you can see here, we're looking at the percentage of tasks that are part of the occupation and focusing on the ones that are adjustable by LLMs. And you can see that the overwhelming share of the occupations are affected somewhat, not completely, right? Very, very few things on the right-hand side of this chart. Okay? Now, again, remember, this is the maximum potential. This is not like it's going to happen tomorrow. But it is telling us that there's going to be lots and lots of partial automation. OK. Now, let's put ourselves in that position and say, we are one of these workers. We're going to lose some percentage of the tasks that we do. How should we think of that? Is this going to be like a really bad thing for us? I think that's our intuition, right? AI takes part of what we do. That's pretty bad. Let's look historically at what happens when automation comes for particular tasks that are part of your occupation. OK, well, you'll see here in the green line, you see that if you lose tasks, okay, and this is here we're looking over almost a 40-year period. If you lose tasks, you do indeed have a change, loss in the number of jobs. Although if you gain tasks, right, we also, when we get new tools, we also often create new tasks with them. When occupations gain it, they actually gain a disproportionate amount of jobs. That's kind of nice. But maybe the more puzzling part of this is the wage part of this, right? If you get more tasks, your wages go up. If you get fewer tasks, actually your wages really don't change very much. Huh. That's not quite the doom and gloom that we're sort of used to thinking about with automation, right? So what's going on? Well, we can actually build our intuition for this by thinking about two different cases that exemplify this really well. So the first is taxi drivers. Taxi drivers have really been affected by automation, not from AI, but from GPS. Right? It used to be the most expert thing that a taxi driver knew how to do was they knew all the streets. Right? Famously in London, there's this thing called the knowledge that people spend 2 years studying to know all the streets in London so that they can be a black cab driver. GPS means that someone can just walk into London and having never been there, as long as they can drive a car, they can do a reasonable job at being a taxi driver in London now. So the most expert part of their job disappeared. You might imagine that's going to decrease their wages, right? More people can do it, more competition for that. Okay. What about on the other side, proofreaders? So proofreaders have also been affected by automation. And in particular, it's the spell checking, right, that we all now have as part. We don't even think about it. But of course, at some point, there actually used to be someone who went through and checked this for you. But that was really the least expert part of their job that got replaced. Right? The rest of it is the sort of complicated, how do I marshal an argument? How do I make sure that I'm presenting the right kind of evidence? That is a more sophisticated type of proofreading. That stuck around. It was this other type of proofreading that disappeared. So these two occupations had divergent trajectories in terms of the expertise that was automated. More expert for the taxi drivers, less expert for the proofreaders. So let's see, did that lead to different outcomes in the labor market as a result of this? And the answer is emphatically yes. Okay, so let's focus first on the wages, right? So we said that taxi drivers lost their most expert tasks, and indeed their wages grew more slowly than the rest of the economy. Whereas proofreaders lost the least expert part of their job, so what was left was more expert, and in fact their wages grew significantly faster than the rest of the economy. But the opposite effect happens on employment. So those proofreaders that get paid more, there are actually fewer of them, right? Many fewer proofreaders. And the taxi drivers and chauffeurs, well, huge jump in them, right? These are the Uber drivers that we see all over the place. So this is kind of interesting, right? This is not the sort of simple story we want to tell about automation being terrible. And I think actually if we intuit, if you think about your own job, I bet you there are some tasks where if someone said to you, hey, I'd be happy to automate those for you, you'd be like, please do, right? I'm very happy to give up the filing my expense reports or something like that. This is sort of telling you that that's probably the least expert task. You're imagining yourself as like, I'm going to get to use more of my expertise. I'm going to be like the proofreaders. Okay. All right. So my colleague David Otter and I have called this idea the expertise framework, right? And it has this idea that if each occupation has a bunch of tasks, one occupation here, one occupation here, depending on where the automation actually happens, you end up with these divergent effects, right? Wages can go up or down, and employment moves in the opposite direction. But really crucially here, it's that moving in the opposite direction, right? It's this idea that, oh, well, some people get higher wages, but there are going to be fewer of those jobs. Those jobs became more specialized. But in the other way, you have jobs becoming less expert, but actually more people doing them. That's an opportunity for more people to flow into a profession. And so, for example, if you think about AI, you can easily imagine that if AI automates part of medicine, maybe a whole bunch of nurses can now do stuff that doctors used to need to do, and that's going to make it much more accessible to many more people. That could be a real advantage, even though, of course, it might be hard for the people in that occupation. Okay, so let me just end today by trying to piece this all together, right? Because we said we're going to get lots of partial automation. We said that the expertise is the thing that matters. So can we take a snapshot of the economy and ask, how is expertise evolving over this time period where we start projecting forward what AI is going to do? And here's what we see. Okay, so here on the y-axis, we have a predicted expertise change due to AI. And here what we're doing is we're comparing this to the mean annual wage. And the reason we're doing that is you will have heard a lot of people talking about, oh, well, AI is going to decimate the white-collar professionals or something like that, right? Looks awfully flat to me, right? Okay, so that's the first thing, right? This is remarkably flat, and that matters a lot for what we're able to do, right? But across income levels, we see this is stable, but there's lots of churn around it. Okay, so what does the churn mean? So these are occupations, right, that have gained expertise, their wages probably go up, but maybe fewer people. Some of these ones, the expertise goes down, right? That means more people, but lower wages in those areas. And so we start to be able to put together this picture that says, well, there is nevertheless going to be a lot of churn, right? So the fact that this is flat means it's not all going to be AI is a tool that makes us all better, or AI is a tool that sort of devalues all of us, right? It's going to be a mix of things. In some occupations, one, in some occupations, the other. But there is going to be a lot of movement where particular occupations change. And so maybe you went into an occupation thinking, I know what this future is going to look like, and it became less good than you wanted. Or you went into a place and you're like, oh, wow, I hit the lottery, right? AI is going to actually make me more productive. Those tools are going to make me much better. We're going to have to manage that as a society. And so that's where I want to leave you, right? We should know that this is not going to be a simple, easy task for people to adjust to. We as a society, we as both businesses and the public sector, need to think about how we can adapt and help people through this process. Thank you.